Jæja, nú við höldum áfram. Næst langar mig að kynna hann Adam Roy Gordon. Og Adam, ég ætla að kynna það á íslensku. Ég veit þú ert að æfa þig, þannig að þessi kynning verður bara á íslensku. Hann Adam, hann var það til fyrir mjög stuttu framkvæmdastjóri yfir bandaríkjadeild UN Global Compact, þar að segja, hann stýrði UN Global Compact í öllum bandaríkjunum, sem ekkert smá mál, og sem slíkur þá hafði hann bara mjög mikil áhrif inn í sjálfbærni vegferðina hjá rekstraraðilum í bandaríkjunum. Hann hefur líka sinnt leikið hlutverki víða, svo sem hjá CTP og Science Based Targets og vann áður í sjálfbærni teymi Colgate Palmolive samsteypunar, þannig að hann hefur reynslu mjög víða að. Og hann Adam, hann er nýbúi hérna á Íslandi, því hann flutti hingað í sumar ásamt fjölskyldunni sinni og sem slíkur þá er hann algjör hvalriki fyrir íslenskt sjálfbærni starf. Þannig að við bjóðum Adam velkominn.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Can you hear me? Great. Góðan daginn, kæru vinir. It's an honor to speak with you today about the evolving landscape of sustainability and human rights in global value chains, and how Icelandic businesses can rise as global leaders. I'm grateful to be here in Harpa among such a distinguished group, such a wonderful audience. Thank you to Festa and its partners for having me, to Elva and her team for organizing this important event. And just really thank you for inviting me as a new resident, having just moved here. It means a lot. So we're at an interesting moment where sustainability leadership is being tested. Regulatory pressure is rising, as Thomas mentioned. Public scrutiny is intensifying. And businesses face mounting challenges in managing supply chain risks. At the same time, the anti-ESG movement, especially in the US, though not limited to there, has driven companies to retreat from public commitments while continuing sustainability behind the scenes. This is a trend called green hushing, and expect to see a lot more of it as well, especially from the USA. But let's challenge a misconception. It may look like companies are abandoning sustainability because it's not financially viable. Pulling out of UN-aligned commitments, changing messaging, it seems like a rejection of sustainability principles, but it's not. It's political risk management. We live in an increasingly polarized world, but there's been no change to the centrality of sustainability to business fundamentals. We can debate truths, as is increasingly being done. Is climate change real? Is slavery wrong? Is the sky blue? When it comes to your investments, when they're on the line, the debate takes a backseat to the truth. Take an early target of these political pressures, BlackRock. After facing politically motivated withdrawals of over $13 billion from state investment vehicles in Texas and Florida over its ESG stance, the firm adjusted its public messaging, scaling back references to ESG while instead talking about transition finance strategies, which focus on guiding companies towards, it guides companies towards ESG performance. And why is that? Because if a risk is business material, it's business material. And to do otherwise is bad business. While the branding, the marketing, the communications may shift, they may soften, the core investment philosophy, focused on risk mitigation and long-term value creation, that remains unchanged. And this reveals a critical truth. Sustainability, climate change, resource scarcity, human rights risks, you don't do this for the advertising potential. There may be some benefit, but it's about business resilience. The language may shift, the politics may shift, but the underlying risks, they remain. And the regulatory landscape makes this even clearer. Consider Europe. CSRD, CFDDD, they go far beyond disclosure. These laws mandate proactive action, requiring companies not only to identify, but to also prevent and mitigate harm across their entire value chain. And there are enforcement mechanisms. And the EU is not alone. In the US, California recently passed the Climate Data Accountability Act and the Climate-Related Financial Risk Act, both of which require companies to operate, that are operating in the state, whether or not they're headquartered there. They could be foreign companies. If you're doing business in California, it requires them to disclose their emissions across their entire supply chain. And this is on top of the Transparency in Supply Chain Act on slavery and human trafficking in supply chains passed just a bit ago. These laws are being implemented even as federal level, national level ESG efforts are facing significant political challenges in the US. Beyond California, New York is advancing legislation focused on climate risk disclosure and supply chain accountability, and more action is developing across states as federal US leadership wavers. Globally, the trend continues. China's implemented mandatory ESG reporting requirements. India's introduced BRSR, requiring companies to disclose supply chain risks and environmental impact. Australia is introducing stricter modern slavery laws, emphasizing supply chain accountability in sourcing and labor practices. And I could go on. I know it doesn't take more than turning on the news, particularly this past week, to recognize that the US has become an outlier. It has in many respects. Yet even there, in many states, and particularly those that have globally relevant markets, the trend there continues. And Iceland is not exempt. Global clients and investors increasingly expect full value chain accountability. And it's not whether you are doing business in these particular jurisdictions, but also whether your customers are doing business there. And the reality is that compliance, while essential, won't protect your business from risk. The uncomfortable truth, and it's quite uncomfortable, is that every company, and yes, even those in this room, almost certainly has forced labor, so slavery, child labor, environmental destruction, and other stomach-churning practices somewhere in its supply chain. On the screen here, you see the hands of laborers enslaved in the palm oil supply chain in Malaysia and Indonesia, holding products made with palm oil. This is from a moving series by the Associated Press a few years ago. The question isn't whether the risks exist. They do. It's how you respond when they surface. This is why true leadership is going beyond compliance. Sustainability is not a box-checking exercise. At its core, it's a business resilience strategy. Companies that lead beyond compliance reduce legal, financial, and reputational risk. They strengthen long-term competitiveness, and they build trust, which in today's polarized marketplace is more critical than ever. And sustainability risks aren't theoretical. They're tied to global power struggles and resource control. Consider Greenland. Trump wants it. He really wants it. Despite his climate change denial, his interest reflects climate realities. Melting ice is revealing critical rare earth minerals for renewable supply chains, as well as Arctic shipping routes critical for supply chains and national defense. And it's not just Greenland. From the drought in the Panama Canal to the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles, these disruptions are not theoretical. They're powerful reminders that sustainability, supply chain stability, and geopolitics are deeply interconnected. And ignoring these shifts doesn't just create moral dilemmas. It exposes businesses to material financial risk and leaves Iceland vulnerable to geopolitical pressures. And this is where Iceland has a powerful opportunity. It's a small market here, but it has something far more powerful. It has moral leadership and it has influence. I think of Thor's gavel, the ceremonial gavel Iceland gifted to the UN General Assembly in 1952, where I had the honor of working before moving here and where the gavel is still in use. Etched on its side, Með lögum skal land byggja, with laws shall we build the land, from Njál's saga, Með lögum skal land byggja, and Með ólögum eyða. This simple yet profound symbol has marked decades of global consensus on peace, on justice, and cooperation for a better world. A small nation leading on values. Icelandic businesses can do the same, not because of market size, but through moral clarity and accountability. Icelandic customers expect it, and global markets reward it. It's a competitive advantage. Leadership doesn't mean having all the answers, certainly not. It means being bold enough to ask the hard questions, to seek help, whether through external expertise or alliances and partnerships. And I think it's worth noting that Iceland's sustainability expertise is here in this room right now, so use it. With that, I just want to end on the fact that all supply chains carry risk, all of them. The question isn't whether you're exposed, it's how you choose to respond. Tack.